thanks to the Independent Students Association of University of Warsaw, with cooperation of European Students for Liberty and Libertarian Association, we can have Dr. Brook today. Dr. Brook is the Executive Director of the Ayn Rand Institute, the entity which is spreading Ayn Rand's works and work across the globe. And Dr. Brook is also an author of several books containing the objectivist philosophy. His latest release is entitled Free Market Revolution. And today's lecture will be on, as I said, morality of capitalism. It will take about an hour, maybe less than an hour. And in the second part of our meeting today, there will be some around half of an hour for the questions from you, for the questions from the audience. So if you would like to ask Dr. Brook a question, you will have to raise your hand, and some of my colleagues will pass you a microphone. But please try to make your questions as short as possible, since we don't have all the time in the world. Yeah, we can only have 1.5 hours. So to make the long story short, Dr. Brook, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me here. This is quite a unique venue. I've never spoken in a gallery of sculpture before, and many of the sculptures here I know and love, so this is quite a unique experience for me. So thank you again to the organizers and to everybody who helped put this together. Over the last 250 years or so, the human race has been running an experiment. Really an experiment on what social, economic ideas work, and what social, political, economic ideas don't work. And by work, I mean what ideas lead to human success, to longer life, to more wealth, to the poor doing better, and what ideas lead to death and destruction. And the experiment is fairly, I think, obvious to anybody who really, honestly, is willing to study history and to look at the facts as they are. 250 years ago, pretty much everybody on the planet was poor. There was a small group of aristocrats who were doing pretty well, and everybody else was poor. Most of us were subsistence farmers, which means we farmed and ate what we produced. And that was about it. No surplus, no saving, no vacation, no holidays, no restaurants. All, by the way, modern concepts. And something happened about 250 years ago. This new experiment in a new political, social system was tried for the first time. You know, if you do a graph of wealth per capita or income per capita, it doesn't really matter. And this is much simpler than anything Piketty writes, so don't worry. If you do a graph, I'm going to do it in the air here, right? And you started, let's say, 10,000 years ago. And you look at income per capita or wealth per capita, and hopefully you can see me in the back. I'll do it up here so you can see me, right? Wealth and income per capita are basically flat and flat and flat. They fluctuate a little bit, like Rome is a little bit of an uptick, and then the Dark Ages a downtick, and then it's up again during the late Middle Ages, and they start going up a little bit. But it's tiny, tiny variations. And then, suddenly, it goes like that, exponentially up in the West. And what is the date in which it starts going up like that? Like sometime in the late 18th century. I like 1776. for two reasons. Establishment of the United States of America, the first real political body that represents this new experiment of freedom. And a book is published in 1776. Anybody know what book? Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. The first, if you will, real book of economics articulating the case for capitalism. And whether you think it's flawed or not is irrelevant to the historical fact that it was an incredibly important book at the time. And that's the beginning of capitalism. And through the 19th century, we came, in many parts of the world, close to capitalism, close to what I would consider pure capitalism, separation of state from economics, the protection of private property, the protection of individual rights. And we came, in some parts of the world, close to it. And what was the result? Incredible wealth creation. The poor rising up, so that by the end of the 19th century, nobody is poor in England and in America as compared to the poor 100 years earlier. Life expectancy almost doubles. Quality of life across the entire income spectrum improves dramatically wherever capitalism is tried. And that is true in the 19th century, but it's also true in the 20th century, because an interesting phenomenon in Asia, this graph of wealth per capita, or income per capita, stays flat. And then suddenly goes like that, about 30, 40 years ago, when they adopt elements of capitalism. In contrast to that, we have regimes, we have governments that have adopted anti-capitalism, communism, fascism, and the story there is always the same. Death and suffering by tens of millions of people, economic stagnation and collapse, poverty, no progress, no innovation, no success. And then we have lots of countries in the middle. Most of the West, during the, at least post-Soviet era, some capitalism, some statism, we mix them up, right? Mixed economies. And most of the world today, almost all of the world today, is some form of mixed economy. And even when you see these mixed economies, what you can do is you can graph them. And you can say, how much economic freedom do they have? How much wealth per capita? How much income per capita? How successful are the people in those countries? And what you find is a pretty direct correlation. The more economic freedom you allow people, the greater the income. In other words, the more capitalism you allow, the more private property you allow, the better off the economies do. The more successful people are. The wealthier people are. But this leads to a real mystery. If capitalism is this successful, if capitalism has been successful in the past and is so successful today, then why is it that so much of Europe and America are moving away from capitalism? And it's not just Europe and America. I was just in South America. And in South America, you have two experiments going on. You have Chile, which during the 1980s and 90s became very pro-market, relatively economically free, and its economy has done fantastically well. The richest country in South America, even though it's a relatively small country in terms of population. Then you've got Venezuela, who is very rich in resources, but has adopted a populist, socialist governance, and where the population is becoming poorer and poorer and poorer almost every day. And yet, right now, as we speak, more countries in South America are trying to be like Venezuela than are trying to be like Chile. And indeed, Chile just recently voted for a socialist president who promised to undo all the free market reforms that have worked so well in Chile. Now that's a real mystery. It's very strange. If we care about wealth, if we care about quality of life, if we care about standard of living, if we care about how the poor are doing, we should all be capitalists. And yet, very few people are capitalists. I mean, capitalists in the sense of advocating for a free market, consistent free market. Almost nobody is a capitalist. We have tiny minorities in almost every country around the world. And as I said, America and Europe are moving away from capitalism. More and more statism, more and more regulations, more and more redistribution of wealth. Latin America is moving away from capitalism in spite of the fact that they can see Venezuela. They can see people starving. They can see people leaving Venezuela and coming back with suitcases full of toilet paper and soap, because there's no toilet paper and soap in Venezuela because of the socialist policies. Doesn't change anybody's mind. It doesn't matter one iota. We hate capitalism. As a culture, we hate it. Now, Poland you might feel, this isn't quite true of Poland. Yeah, because you've experienced communism recently enough that you're still moving in the right direction. Wait 10, 20 years. You'll get a little comfortable, you'll have a good life, and you'll vote for the socialists very quickly, because that's the pattern of everywhere in the world. And I suspect you're not that different than the rest of the world. It's already happening. We don't even have to wait 10, 20 years, right? So we have to ask the question why. We have to ask the question why because our future depends on it. Because if I'm right, and I'm open to challenges during the Q&A about whether I'm right, but if I'm right and capitalism is such a good system for wealth creation, for income, for standard of living, for the poor, and so on, then why are we turning our backs on it? Why do we resent it and hate it so much? And we do hate it, right? When the financial crisis happened in the United States, before anybody had an opportunity to investigate, before anybody had an opportunity to check the economics of what happened, to look at the data, everybody knew who was at fault, right? The headlines was what? Who caused the crisis? Capitalism. Capitalism. And who among the capitalists caused the crisis? Of all the capitalists out there, who do we hate the most?
The rich.
Well, not so much the rich, particular kind of rich people. Who do we hate the most? Always. In the West, we always blame these guys for every economic crisis ever. The bankers, of course, bankers. We used to, you know, it used to be Jewish bankers, but now that's politically incorrect. So it's just bankers, right? We hate bankers, and we hate capitalism, even though there is no capitalism without banking. Banks, allocators of capital, are more responsible for the success of the modern world as any other single group, and yet we hate them. So what is it about capitalism we hate so much? What is it about free markets that we resent so much, that we always turn our backs against them? What's that? Inequalities. I don't think so, because if you look at the United States, nobody cares about inequality in the United States. Poll after poll shows that Americans don't care. They admire the rich. They want to be rich. They want to be like them. Envy is not what's driving us. Something else more fundamental, actually, I think the cause of envy is driving it. So let me ask you, what's capitalism about? Hard work. It's about hard work. But why do we work hard? I mean, the end can't be the hard work. What are we working hard to achieve? What's that? Yeah, improving one's life is a really nice way of saying it. What do people go to work for? Money, to make money. I know it's a little embarrassing to say, right? And I can see it. It's embarrassing for you, it's embarrassing for every audience. It's so obvious. Like, why does Apple make this? To make a profit. The profit margin on this thing is 60%. If they cared about me, they could sell this a lot cheaper, right? They don't care about me. They care about profits. That's not just profit. You guys don't all go to work just for the profit, just for the money. What else is it about? It's about fun. Right? It's about satisfaction. It's about passion. It's about doing something that you value, that you enjoy, that you have fun doing. Steve Jobs had a lot of fun with this, right? But what is this iPhone? Who was it made for? Who did Steve Steve Jobs build this for? For Steve Jobs. To make money and to have fun. And it's a reflection of his passion. So producers in capitalism produce because it's good for them. It's because it's in their self-interest. They're being selfish. Right? We all know this, right? Businessmen are selfish. They're out to make money. Now, we as consumers, on the other hand, right? Maybe not, right? Because when I went and bought my first iPhone in 2008, the U.S. economy is spiraling out of control, and I wanted to stimulate the U.S. economy. Because that's why you go shopping. You go shopping to help your fellow man. You go shopping to make sure people have jobs. Why do you go shopping? To make your lives better. You're being self-interested. Markets. Markets, free or unfree. Markets are places in which we go to pursue our own interests, our own self-interest. Markets are all about the pursuit of self-interest. Markets are all about people who are self-interested meeting together to exchange. And when I buy the iPhone, I'm better off. Why am I better off? This cost me $300. How much is it worth to me? More than 300. Very good. Usually I get $300. No, if it was only $300, I wouldn't bother, right? It's more than $300. So my life is better because I got something worth more than $300. And Apple, are they worse off? Right? Because they lost an iPhone that's worth more than $300. For them, the money is more important than the iPhone. So they made a profit, and I'm better off. By the way, that's all you have to know about inequality. Because, by the way, when I bought an iPhone, inequality got worse. I got poorer by $300, and Apple got richer by $300. So inequality based on how Piketty and all his followers measure it just got worse. But that's stupid. I'm being nice. It's worse than stupid. It's dishonest. Because I didn't get poorer. I got richer. Because I got an iPhone worth more than $300 to me. So I'm richer, and Apple's richer. But you can't measure that with data. Because you can't measure how much this is worth to me with data. There's no market.